and welcome back to another episode of Adulting with Hannah. I'm Hannah, here today to talk about all the books I read in 2018. So, I didn't read as many books. If you watched my last literature and review from the books I read in 2017, I worked at a bank that was very boring, and I read a lot of books while I was there. I wasn't actually allowed to read physical books. I had to email them to myself as PDFs and read them on my computer, otherwise I got in trouble. But anyways, I literally would read like 2 books a week. So I don't have a job where I can read at work anymore, so I didn't read as many. But I did still read quite a few, and I will talk about them now. The first book I read in 2018 was The Husband's Secret. That's by Liane Moriarty. And that is, I think, my favorite of Liane Moriarty's books so far. She did just come out with a new one in November, and I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet, but it's definitely on my list for 2019. I'm just trying to finish my current book before the end of the year, so I haven't read that one yet. And then after that, I read another Liane Moriarty book called What Alice Forgot. It was one of her first books, I think, or maybe her second book. I highly recommend Liane Moriarty. They are very intriguing, very exciting. It gets you hooked in really quickly to the characters and what's going to happen or what did happen, and it's one of those things where everything gets wrapped up at the end and you're like, whoa. If you didn't know, the HBO series Big Little Lies is based off of one of her books, so if you enjoy that series, then you'll probably enjoy most of her books. And her books are all very similar, but also obviously different, but they all have kind of a formula to them that I find appealing. You know, like you kind of just get right into it and it's just pleasurable and just like, you know, familiar, I guess is the thing that I would say, because I've read all but her newest book so far. So yeah, highly recommend Liane Moriarty and all of her books. And then I read a book called The Chemist. That is by Stephanie Meyer, who wrote Twilight. This book's not about vampires. It's about this woman who used to work for the CIA, and she was a person who extracted information from people using chemicals in their body to torture them, basically. And she's very gifted in many things, CIA and secret agent related, and it's very interesting. And she gets put on this mission that is supposed to get her out of the game because they want to kill her because of what she knows, etc., etc. It's a really intriguing book. I read it really quickly because it was just very exciting and I really enjoyed it. And I do like Stephanie Meyer's writing style. I know she got a lot of crap from a lot of people for the Twilight stuff, but I thought Twilight were amazing books. I just wasn't personally a fan of the movies. So anyways, highly recommend. And then I read The Power by Naomi Alderman. That book was actually recommended by Obama and a lot of other people. It was really, really, really hyped and everywhere. Like I follow a lot of like book related, reading related Instagrams, and it was everywhere. I did not personally enjoy it. I didn't get a lot out of it. It wasn't eye-opening. It wasn't what I expected it to be. It was just kind of, I just didn't like it. I don't know. It's an interesting book, and it's definitely an interesting perspective, and I just think it was so far-fetched that I couldn't relate to it. It just wasn't what I was expecting. Then I read 2 books by Celeste Ng, who is probably my favorite new discovery author from 2018. And because I had already been reading Liane Moriarty before that, so Celeste Ng is definitely my favorite new discovery. And I read her book Everything I Never Told You and Little Fires Everywhere. I read them back to back. I liked Everything I Never Told You more than Little Fires Everywhere. Little Fires Everywhere, I think, is definitely more hyped out of her books. I think it was on the Reese Witherspoon reading list, and I think that they're actually doing either a movie or a TV show about it, and Reese Witherspoon is in it. I'm not sure which it is, but anyways, both excellent books. Highly recommend Celeste Ng and anything she's written. I think she's written children's books, maybe. I don't know, but highly recommend those 2 books. How many times have I said highly recommend? I need to stop saying that. Okay, sorry. Yeah, those are both great books. I preferred Everything I Never Told You over Little Fires Everywhere, but I highly enjoyed both books. Next, The Last Anniversary, another Liane Moriarty book. I liked it a lot. If I had to pick one out of all the ones I read, it would be The Husband's Secret for sure. I think they're doing a TV show about it or something, I'm not sure. But it's my favorite one, but I very much liked The Last Anniversary as well. And then I also read The Nightingale. That is by Kristen Hanna. And that book is about the story of two sisters during World War II in France, I think. Sorry, it's been a while since I read it. In France. It was a very, very gripping book. I mean, you can imagine. And one of them was actually taken to a concentration camp, so all that happened. And just, you know, a story about strength and perseverance and the power of love between sisters and family. And it's just, it's a really good read. Then I read The Woman in the Window by, I can't remember, A.J. Finn. That was a kind of psychological thriller, in my opinion, and this woman sees something from her window that happened across the street, and she thinks somebody was murdered, but she also has agoraphobia, hasn't left her house in years, and she likes to watch the neighbors and stuff because she never leaves her house, so that's kind of like her entertainment. And she's also kind of a drunk, gets into the wine quite a bit, and she thinks she sees something across the street. She thinks she sees somebody get murdered, but nobody believes her, and did she really see it or not? She was pretty drunk, the whole thing. So it's really exciting and a good read, and it's fast to read, and I really liked it. Next I read The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. That is a fantasy novel about a girl who discovers a few things about her past that lead her down a very complicated, very interesting trail of self-discovery and fantasy, and lots of interesting characters and stories, and it gets really intense. And if you have a very strong imagination and like reading very descriptive, out of this world type books, and you'll really enjoy it. For me, it was just a little too much. I would kind of get lost in the description of what was happening and read 5 pages and have no idea what was going on. But I can definitely see a lot of people really enjoying that book, a lot of people who enjoy fantasy and things like that. Then I read Missing Presumed by Susie Steiner. This book I did not like. I didn't like the ending. The main character, I didn't like her. I didn't like the main character. I didn't like the ending. I didn't like most of the book. It's a missing person type thing, obviously, and she's a detective and and it's, I just didn't like it. Then I read The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. She's a great author. That's the only book I've read by her so far. I definitely wanted to read more of hers. I really enjoyed that book. It pulls you into the story and keeps you guessing. There's a couple parts that are a little slow and seems to take forever, and then you like read the whole book and you realize that the whole thing happened over the course of a really short amount of time, and it's crazy, but it's a good book, and I definitely would read more by Ruth Ware. Okay, next I read When Never Comes by Barbara Davis. This is a good, like, feel-good family novel. It's about a woman whose husband dies and was found with a strange woman who was not fully clothed, and she starts exploring her past after the loss of her husband because she was abused, basically, and things like that, and wants to find out about the woman in the car and things like that, and she finds out that they had a child together, and she feels responsible for the child and things like that. So it's a good book. I enjoyed reading it, and that's about it. Next is my #1 favorite book that I read in 2018, and it is called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And this book is hilarious. I laughed, I think, out loud like 2 times within the first chapter. It's really funny. It's intriguing. It's about a woman with, I want to say maybe like some sort of Asperger's or autism or both, I'm not sure, but some sort of social deficiencies, doesn't really understand social cues or social norms or things like that. And she is just so lovable and fascinating, and has some things in her past that you don't really know about until the end and things like that. And she's trying to navigate love and friends and things like that. And it's a great book. She's British, that just makes it so much better. And if you read any of the books I mentioned, I would definitely read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's fantastic. Next, The Hypnotist Love Story, another Leanne Moriarty book. I'm not going to go too much into all of her books. I feel like I would talk about them forever. They're great. read any or all of them. I love them. And then I read Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. That is about based on a true story about a woman who stole children from poor families to basically sell them as orphans to rich families. And she would trick the parents of these low-income or poverty-stricken kids to sign over their children without their knowledge, either like right after birth when they were like still under anesthesia. They would basically sign over their children, or you know, if they were desperate or whatever. And it follows the story of two kids who, or a group of, like a family, and one main child who was taken from her parents and sold as an orphan basically. And then it also follows a woman in present day who was researching all of this and finds out somebody in her family has a connection to that whole situation. So it's a great book. It's sad in parts and eye-opening because these things really happened. Kids were literally sold to rich families, claiming to be orphans when they weren't. And yeah, so it's a good book. I really enjoy reading it. It's just, it's sad and like kind of eye-opening, but it's a good book. And then I read this book called What Should Be Wild by Julia Fine. It was very highly recommended on all the book lists, so I read that and I did not like it. It just didn't. It's another fantasy type novel. This girl has the ability to kill things and bring them back to life by touching them. And then basically her father turns her into like a science experiment and doesn't allow her to use her powers on anything. And so she's very sheltered. And then she's like being called by like the woods behind her house, which have like some sort of power over her. And like she has another part of herself that lives in there. And it's just, it's an interesting concept, but there are so many parts of the book that I just thought were either unneeded or overdone, and then the end is just like da 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 da, and that's it. And it's not very like, I don't know. I just hate books that there's so much build up for the end, and then the end is just like 2 pages of just like da da, and now it's done. And I just hate books like that. So that book is like that, and I just don't like it. And then I tried to read another Kristen Hanna book because I loved Nightingale so much. So somebody recommended I read Firefly Lane, which is set in the 70s, and it's about 2 girls who become best friends and go through college together and other stuff, I'm assuming. I only got like 20% of the way. I read it on a Kindle, so everything is in percentages. I think my main problem was I couldn't identify with any of the characters at all. All the decisions they made were completely opposite or like not congruent with anything that I would do, and it just didn't really bring me in. So I stopped reading that, and then that same person also recommended I read The Key, which is my current book by Catherine Hughes. This book is about a woman who starts to do research into this insane asylum in her town where she grew up that is somehow related to her father, and it goes back in time to talk about a new patient at the insane asylum in the 50s, as well as a student nurse at the same time in the 50s, and then the woman in present day, well, 2006, who was doing the research on the hospital. So I'm a little less than halfway. I just started it a couple of days ago, and it has definitely really brought me into the story and the history and everything that they're talking about for this insane asylum, and I'm really enjoying it so far. And I think it was only $1.99 on Kindle, so highly recommend that book just for the price. And even if you don't like it, you only spend $1.99. So yeah, that's the book I'm currently reading, and once I finish it, I will put my review on Goodreads. If you'd like to follow me on Goodreads, I'll link that below. And I also have an actual book club. We meet once a month and read a book together and talk about it. If you're interested in reading along with us, you may follow my hashtag HMFBookClub on Instagram, and I will keep you updated on what book we're reading. And I will try to go back and add my thoughts on the book to the post once I read it. I'm not very good about doing that, but you can definitely read my review on things on Goodreads as well. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're a big reader like me, give this video a big thumbs up and leave a comment down below telling me your favorite book you read in 2018. I would love to hear it and add it to my list for 2019. And thank you for watching. I will see you in my next video.